Hello everybody, welcome to my acrylic painting demonstration. And today I will be looking at Florence from the top of the Duomo Cathedral. Absolutely amazing view, quite a difficult composition. There are loads of architectural elements and I'm really interested to tackling them all together. Perhaps looking at the spiral following the decorative and structural support of the dome, following maybe the streets of the main piazzas, and then maybe coming back via the Campanile of the tower, and then staying maybe in the cathedral, maybe focusing some of the shadows and lights. At the same time, I still want to see some exciting mountains at the back. So Florence is in the valley, surrounded by some gorgeous, beautiful mountains far distant from us. So I have picked up a violet background, violet and ochre mixed with a little bit of white to give me enough kind of set color and tone for overall rooftops and overall color of the city. So I can straight away go for some of the shadows, maybe amplify some of the darkness, maybe play with the perspective and some of the details of the city, and as well perhaps exaggerate some of the scale of the mountains at the back. So on my palette, I have some white. Sorry if you can't see, that's why I've circled it with a little bit of paint, so we know it's white. I have some ochre, cadmium yellow, crimson, violet, ultramarine blue, and some black. So 5 colors in black and white. If I'll need some other ones, I'll see if I'll get some more, but I think that should be enough to get started. And I have a flat brush and 3 different size filbert brushes. So they're flat brushes with a round end to help me out with some of the shapes. And I'm going to use my synthetic round brush, medium size, for my initial sketching. So let's get going. I'm going to mix my sketching color now by using a little bit of white and some ochre and some violet. Now, if I'll make it slightly lighter, then I can see the lines quite easier on my board. But I also might, in some cases, makes a darker version, so it will support my shadows as well. And I think maybe my darker version of this color will be more beneficial, so the lighter tones could come over it later on. Right, so let's get started. So my first component is that beautiful, beautiful curvature which goes over the dome. So let's find how big it's going to be. Now, I don't overly want to make it dominating, but at the same time, I do want to place, perhaps enlarge other buildings. So I'm going to roughly sketch and place it as initial thoughts. Might even use tiny bit of black just to make my lines being seen better. Okay. And let's have that. Now, if I were to put a straight line over it, it will show the actual perspective, kind of, well, visual recognition of the structure here. So the dome The cathedral dome is actually going to go around somewhere here, and this part is hugging it and goes over. So Brunelleschi's design of that gorgeous structure is still extremely inspirational, and climbing it for me was marvelous. Now, if it will be slightly different to the photograph, I might deliberately kind of encourage certain directions of the lines to help me focus more on the city rather than just on the overall details here. So I'll have to experiment and play with it afterwards. Right, next big structures, before I spend any more time and deciding if it's correct or if it's need to be adjusting or if anything else needs to be doing them, will be playing with the direction of the cathedral itself, so the body of the cathedral. And let's decide on its perspective. I will have to find out if it's right or not when I actually put it in here. Okay, so the entrance is right here behind that gable. I want to know if that's going to be big enough. Now we have a third point of perspective here, so we can see the campanile, the tower, slightly wider at the top and getting narrower, going away from us. Now the camera picks it up quite easily. I'm going to sketch it with that perspective, but then I'm going to make my final decision if it's going to be a beneficial view for me, or if more two-dimensional perspective will be enough. My lines are a little lighter here, so let's just make them less reflective. Okay, that cathedral has extended roof. Okay, with some beautiful shadows. Might even take it slightly further. Let's leave it at that again as I'm manipulating and eventually deciding on the scale to be slightly different. I want that tower to shoot in front of us. At the same time, I do want to focus on some of the mountains at the back, and I don't want the tower overwhelming it. Now, if some of the lines are a little reflecting there, once they will dry, you should be able to see them more clearly. Now, some important details. Will be some of the windows. Okay, let's find all of that structure. It's almost like it's shooting out one way and the buildings will be coming out the other way. But let's keep minimal details, but that does give some of the height to the front of the front entrance here. And we've got a building, a beautiful building there. So as much as I want to keep it in similar surroundings. I do want to have an artistic license by widening perhaps part of the square here and following the feel of the place more than just using a photograph. I think maybe some of those lines could go slightly wider immediately. Let's have a look. So my line for the windows, because I wanted to see that some of that darkness. Okay, loads of lovely texture. So I just want to make sure the proportions are there at the same time. Don't want to spend too much time, just in case if I need to change the shape or move the overall tower. Okay, let's get some of that rough perspective in here. It will give me a few pointers. Okay, my lines need to be following similar direction, kind of where we've got the same vanishing point for the main body of the cathedral, same as for the campanile. However, the square, not all the lines of the buildings are parallel to the cathedral, and plus I can take a little bit more artistic license to create the extra space to have the feel for the place. Okay, so that's going to be some more lighter tones, darker tones. Might start finding some darker shapes. So I'm sketching not just with line, but I'm also sketching with a shape. And again, the more transparent my colors, the more water I add to my sketching paint, the more it reflects. So hold on, it will be less reflective shortly as it dries. Okay. Put a nice shadow to this one. It highlights immediate spaces next to the buildings. Quite like that nice dark shadow. Supporting it here. Loads of other dark elements and more other structures. Again, I'll just keep it simplified. Loads of buildings going behind kind of this immediate surrounding, and this surrounding is more important to me for the colors, for the opening of the space, for creation of that valley. So now I'm going to play with the horizon. So I might shrink the distance of the city. Okay. And surrounding hills, more immediate Hills where some of the famous villas, maybe getting parts of the green parks in that direction. And finally, I do want to exaggerate some of the mountains in the distance. Okay, some heights, some drops. Okay. And now, just using the space left, I'm going to pick up some more important structures. So, for example, that immediate building will have a rooftop, which perhaps will have more details. Maybe the street will just have a little bit more direction, and then I might make it lost as it starts twisting away and going towards the right. Now there is a train station that way, so that all of the roads start turning. So maybe part of these buildings will be directed that way as well. So all I'll be seeing from the buzz of the buildings is some wider shadows and some narrower shadows. All the rest might be more of a buzz of them, of the color. And on this side, again, we can have a rooftop and perhaps more detailed building. Just to get some texture of the windows. I'm sure the owners of these lovely villas and historic buildings will appreciate the atmosphere I'm trying to create here, rather than exact number of windows. Again, if I'll go for slightly darker tone, just to see some of the shapes being less reflective. Now with three-dimensional perspective, all the shapes from the top are getting narrower, or it might have been going the other way around. It might have been from this side. If I would have been looking up, shapes would be going smaller, but my eye level are probably the widest. Lines stay that way. Okay. Any other important buildings or important directions? I think if I were to pick up some light within the buildings on this side, maybe I can divide other streets views and maybe some overall directions. There's another cathedral coming up here. Santa Maria Victoria, I think, if I'm on the right. It's very elongated, but I might need to make it. No, I think I'm quite happy keeping it quite tall, elongated, and slightly bigger than again in the photograph, just to exaggerate the shape, the importance of it, the direction of the city. Now, following the green lines, actually the greens will be following the river, and that's why we also will have extra that zigzag, that gentle flow line of the trees and the buildings to follow. Okay, I think I'm quite happy with that. let's just work for some more shadows and some more details of these shadows, which might help us to follow that spiral. I quite like the zigzag of dark lines, but they need to bring us back, not to get us lost. So let's have a look for some of the shadows at the front. Now I'm looking for the most immediate darks. Of course, the tower will have some darks. Well, actually, the tower is not lit up at all. The tower is in the shadow, but my background will support that darkness. I will look for some highlights later on, but I'm looking for some of the most immediate blocks of dark, and perhaps finding the directions of them, which again will be leading towards us. Okay, maybe this shape will kind of stop us to fully to come out this way. It's kind of brings us back, not to kind of, it's almost starting point from here. Okay, that's good. Can have a little bit more playful shadows on this side. Let's follow the shadow from the tower on roof side of the roof of the cathedral. So the stories about the cathedral and how it's been built, and the stories of the Medici. I want my painting to feel that complexity of legends and stories and most exciting events. Kind of when we look at the piece, at the painting, and we search for those stories. So I want the viewer to be able to be part of it. Let's have a look at the shapes, the shadows. Maybe something slightly darker behind the tower, so the tower is a little bit more offset. Again, I need to be a bit more patient with details. So the story will be important within my painting. Okay, so these buildings developing further, start breaking up into more of a labyrinth. Everybody who've been to Florence, or not even been to Florence, will have some different connections to the city via the stories, via the arts, the architecture, fabulous foods, wine, history. For me, Florence was the first city, well, one of the first cities I went abroad to see, full of arts. I just studied in my art school. So I was 14 when I came to Italy, to Florence. I was totally overwhelmed with the volume of most fascinating buildings, arts. I think I quite like that big chunk of the square here. Things I recognized from what I've studied, things which just absolutely wowed me in all aspects of culture, environment. It's played a massive role on me becoming a painter later on in life. Okay, I'm happy with that one, and I'm going to offset the hill here with green, with much darker greenery on that area as well. Okay, that's good. So I think most of my darker tones as a shape, as exciting layout, I'm going to stop. I'm sure we'll find some more amendments and find some more small adjustments to the darks, but let's now focus on some of the most bold highlights. For my lighter tone, I'm going to choose the same colors, ochre and violet, but I'm going to have much more white in it and more ochre than my previous selection. And if I'll start using the same brush with just a little bit of linear development, and then I might need to pick up a larger brush to have some slightly bigger, flatter shapes. So let's place it. So my tones are different, but the colors are the same, as for the background, as for my darks, as for my highlights. So what I have already, the most dark tone, the medium tone, and the lightest tone. Within each of them, I can vary the color, so the saturation of warm, cool, how that color will differ, and also I will change the darkness. So each light will have a bit more of a medium darkness and a highlights and the darker tone within each this paler segment. But so far, again, I'm just working into the whole. I want to see the more unified, more simplified structures. Okay, that disappears. Some different materials, how they all come together here, and have different patterns. It's weathering of the materials as well. It's weathering, maybe some lichens growing, so different shapes come together from the materials used, as from various other factors. So let's not over focus on the details, but look for major lights. Yes, this section is lighter, but overall would it be competing, yeah, with some of the more highlighted areas. So let's leave it like that for now. Let's have a look at the cathedral, some of the elements of light there. Cathedral roof. Okay, so some of these shapes. Again, I'm not overly precise about perspective here, just trying to catch some light. I can work within the shape, so maybe I don't even need to do as much differentiation of it. But immediately the shape springs up. We'll see how it will dry, if it will need to be lighter, or we can build up the tones gradually. There's a big shadow here, but it is catching up some light on both sides, and the white marble. So it's a balcony, almost like a balcony, which leads above, which stays above, sorry, in front of the facade. So that one is still highlighted. Let's have a look at the row of buildings and look at them as a whole. So I'm running out of my color, I just need to mix some more. So the row of buildings here will be important to see that light. I might pick up a rhythm of some of the light at the back, in front of the distant cathedral. As the street will be turning, I might be seeing some individual landmarks to show that light on the buildings as well. Okay, there are a few very bold and bright shadows, sorry, shadows, light effects, even on the road. So I might pick up some highlights, angles, which almost not just shapes on themselves, but they characterize them, the gaps, and also tell us more about the buildings they are on, or which they're surrounded, or what they've been shaped by. So if that building is going to have more darker tone, I just need to be careful not to clash the color, the darkness of the pavement with the darkness of the cathedral here. But again, I can touch things up and make it slightly bolder, even if it's temporarily. Maybe that one will end up being slightly darker. So those important things are staying there. There are a few dynamic things on the pavement, and there are vans or vehicles with very light rooftops, so there are some reflective surfaces, or people walking in bold light clothes. So let's leave them out for the moment. Let's focus on some other shapes of light. Okay, that's almost again a little entrance as I'm working further. Now the campanile will have a little gentle line of light on its side. I might not be getting it right yet, but the effect of that tower and its light and how it gently turns in each corner might just be an exciting glow. Okay. That could be slightly wider. And I'm gonna work at the color of the pavement. If I gently dilute it, it will settle in slightly darker than my buildings, and maybe the side of the buildings could be topped up with some extra light. So I'm already subdividing, or at least kind of talking about subdividing my highlights into the lighter and darker ones. So if I'll do the whole shape here, actually I could have left a shadow, which I haven't sketched. So if I'll just lift some of the paint here. This might be my partial shadow. Okay, and if I'll make this building slightly lighter, immediately that effect will start taking place. And the same as this building. And it could go slightly darker further back so that contrast is becoming less significant. But where we are close here, we can make it extra lit up. Okay. Some of these lines could stay slightly bolder again as they're drying. I can see how they are remaining. Okay, again, slightly darker tone. For some, I think there are some terraces on top of this house. Again, I'm not too interested into what they might be, but that storytelling of what that lighter space is. Oh, this is a terrace where people might be gathering in the evenings when the heat of the sun is much lower, and they can overview the city. And again, at the same time, I'm trying to focus on some of the leading pattern of light, as well as I've done the darks, which will be directing me towards that the line of the river, and then the towers of the Santa Maria the Poplar, the cathedral there, those towers and the front of the cathedral. Maybe there might be some other lines which will almost stop it and continue for us to follow that line and bringing it all back. Okay, or maybe it will be going that way and then coming back and staying this way. So again, I need to focus and continuously ask those questions myself. What will support that dynamics of composition? What color, what maybe light, maybe the shadows, maybe dynamics of tone. Okay, so if some of the rooftops are not quite straight, that could be tweaked afterwards. Right, so I'm quite happy with the light, but I want to work now with the light of the sky. Now, I don't really need to have it in ochre and violet, so this might be my first color I'll get started working with. So I'll pick up a slightly bigger brush, actually quite a big brush in comparison. Just soften it here, and let's use some white. Just work it into the bristles, and a small amount of ultramarine. Now I limited myself to one blue, so again the whole composition will stay united. Now the color here looks slightly darker than on my screen, so I'll place it because most of the work is quite dark. Sometimes it's harder to see what the final color is going to be in darkness or even in color because of the screen, how the camera picks it up. So let's just apply it. Okay. I'm going to slightly vary it by making small changes in the darkness of the blue. And hot day in Florence will always be offset by the blue sky in Florence, over Florence, shall I say. So a slight change of even that sky will be good to have a bit more darkness. Now the mountains, I quite like them being quite dark there. So let's go for ultramarine and a dab of black. Now that's a very dark tone, so let's make sure we'll come just a tone or two darker from the sky, but less fresh and blue. I do like the hint of the violet in my background, so I think if I were to introduce a little bit of violet into this blue, but make it slightly lighter, so maybe that violet will support it. I need to be careful because my valley and the mountains, distant mountains, are slightly different in the color to the rest of the painting, but I needed them to be united. So maybe some of the violet of the background will need to be still offset by them within, offset within them, those hills. Okay. Maybe I will touch some lighter violet tones on top. So if I'll use extra white and violet with what I have on my brush. Now violet in its own looks a little, I think it might look a little foreign. Let's test it against the colors we have here. Yeah, maybe a little bit foreign. So a dab of ochre with that violet might just reunite it again, bring it closer to my background, initial background of the violet here. Maybe a little glow, which creates some of the lit up areas below in the valley. And also I might put that reference within the city, within the area of the buildings where might have more shadows, as the sun is gently perhaps just moving around. So I'm creating now my own feel for the piece. Can I offset any of these colors part of my campanile? I think I can, because there's so many varieties of grays and cools. Right, that looks very light on the screen. Right, I've decided against that color there. I think it's too light. So let's try it elsewhere, maybe part of the cathedral. So it's still quite gray, gray violet, but you've got a bit more extra light here. So perhaps maybe some segments of the roof here will have those grayish tones. Big blocks. Might use a bit more diluted color here to show the texture and also to show some of the violet still behind it. Okay, I think some of the darker tones will spring back there as well later on. Okay. So I might just lay off this color because it is for the city at the moment, because it might be too pale at this stage. All right, so let's change the color on the brush. And let's look for some of them beautiful excuse me, terracotta rooftops. So I'm going to go for some white. I'm going to go for some yellow and some crimson to bring some extra light into the city. Okay, that's very bold and quite strong. I think it might be too fiery, but I'm not going to say no till I try it. So let's find a place for this color. I think it might be a bit too bright. Now against my whites, I know the whites are not going to be as strong, so it might be even stronger. So maybe a dab darker, maybe slightly more red. At the same time, I do want to exaggerate some of the light, that excitement of light. So let's try this one. And I know once I'll surround the area with more colors, so the violet as the background color is not going to be the main dominant tone. All other colors will fall into place. So let's just go with gut instinct here. So I'm thinking of overall shape for the moment. The roof more or less reads similar, so I will need to find a close darkness but different, slightly maybe a tone darker, and perhaps change of color there as well. Well, my company will got some relief there, so it's not going to be perfect shape, but again, this is just a little bit of planning, a little bit of similar color perhaps for the areas of the balconies. Just gives me similar view, and I think I'm going to change the direction gently. Okay, Those little directional changes make again the story more exciting. I might not always get them right, but I'm going to aim to follow the patterns of those shadows. So I need to double check if that line is following. It's looking straight. Okay, so I might need to be done with adjusting later on. Anywhere else this beautiful orange could come in. Now I also realize this might be quite a big brush for small rooftops, but let's just try to spot some of the bigger shapes first. Even if they're not going to be perfect or final, let's just have some of this color uniting the painting. And also giving us an opportunity to decide if that is going to be the boldness of the light, or maybe it will need to be slightly toned down. There's some lovely light on the Campanile's rooftop, but I will need to consider that slightly. The light is still bold on the other side, so it means that this side will still need to be in a tiny bit of a shadow. Okay, any other bold blocks? Now I'm looking at the patterns again. More on my painting than on the actual city, on the photograph, what I'm trying to say. The direction of the roofs will suggest the bolder, lighter colors here. And here it might be more suggestiveness of it. Some of the buildings change, that they're extended, they've been rebuilt, they've been changed direction of a street. They're not perfectly designed, they've been over designed and redesigned over the years. So that puzzle of shapes allows me to be more creative. Okay, I think this rooftop could still be similar darkness. And as I'm painting with this orange color, my paint become more diluted, so it might not be as strong in its color when it dries. All right, now let's have a look at the other side of the shadows of the rooftop. So I'm going to go for some ochre and some crimson and a dab of white. I want a little bit more stronger red in it. Ochre makes the color less vibrant, a little bit duller, but it doesn't have to remain dark. I can make it still a little lighter with some white, but it will make it more color of the shadow then. So it's still quite a light pigment, maybe just tiny bit more darker. That's exactly what I wanted. but it is a touch different. Okay. Now my darker lines immediately benefit my whole structure. So the darker central line gives me a little more of a shadow, even if I want to put a little highlight on it later on. It does create space, it does create dynamics. Okay, so these rooftops will have that, more of that red. If I'll start from smaller quantities, I can extend or improve on the volume or quality of line or shape afterwards. So far I'm going again with a feel for it. Direction. Okay, so we're changing them. Spaces here and the roof colors changing as I slowly turning away. Just a small angle from the sunshine. Quite nice to dig a little bit more into the varieties or work on a bigger scale to see that variety, being able to find more streets and smaller buildings in there. Okay. Another little corner somewhere here. Let's have a look how this red will develop. And to be careful so the shapes the buildings of those oranges are not going to be similar. Maybe partially it's going to be extended that width, and these ones will be more little lines. If I overdo them, I can always reduce them in size afterwards. But again, bearing it in mind is important. Right, campaneles, rooftop. I think this corner is the lightest one. So I can just a little bit to put that similar red, but the other side, I think I'll make it slightly darker with a violet and crimson here. Not a huge jump, but probably a tone or 2 steps up in darkness. Might not get the right angle yet, but if I'll place the color, I can shape it the correct perspective later on. Too big brush to do it, but I suppose I can do it with my sponge and just remove some of the unwanted volume. Now everything what reflects is just water here, which will go once it's dried. Again, there's some more dynamics. I love that little red dot. It tells me quite a lot about the area or what's going on there. Okay, that's my shadow here. I might put a little more hint of red on part of the Duomo here. Maybe that hint of violet within the red will support my current violet here. It's a nice bold shadow, which is quite good. All being offset by this light. Just trying to remove the corner so I can touch up the color. Okay. Full of some pinks of a shadow, really dark shadow, but quite a strong juxtaposition in the color here. So it's a shadow, but there is part of the light lit up area of the marble. So by the time I'll have the silhouette of the darker material of the roof, I think that will do really well. Okay, again, just placement of the color for so far. I might need to check the size of it or the direction of it, but that's my starting points for the understanding the color, how the colors will start working together. So that's pink works quite nice, and that's where maybe this pink, it looks like it's glowing, but it is quite a dark one if you compare it to the whites. So let's place this pink on them on the tower. Let's see if that's again looks very light. Although that area looked very light as well when I placed it, but once the paint dried, it became darker. So I might just make it slightly darker and then let it dry and see if that is actually the case. So if it's just the playfulness of the volume of the colors at the moment. So the white tower is seen with quite a lot of pinks here, and at the same time turquoise colors, and they all mingle up together to create the white marble. So the red is getting all the reflections here from the rooftops. The turquoise and blues will be all the cooler shadows of the marble. So let's tiny bit persevere and let it dry. I think we're into something here with this pink. Even if some of that pink will be cooled off with them later on turquoise and blues, I think at least it will be partially supported from underneath. There's quite a bit of this similar pink here. So that's definitely a reflection on the camera. So that's definitely not a white spot here, same as this wet surface. So I just need to be a little bit more patient. I don't want the tower to be darker than the background. Okay. Can I put any of this similar pink elsewhere? There's a different tiling system overlapping. I just show enough. Okay. Again, I'm not sure if that's going to be my final decision in this area, but let's give it a try and see how it's perhaps settles. Is it going to have that lighter tone to see it through? Maybe the shadow will be enough to have the suggestiveness, I think. Perhaps just a shadow. Okay, so it's partially dried, but maybe hints of that color still be good, and maybe that's exactly what I need. Right, I think I'm ready now to start picking up more details. And I have two flat brushes, both with a square, well, one with a square end and another one got a little slant cut. In comparison to the filbert brushes, which have a round edge, I think these ones might help me to paint some of them windows or in between the windows, and also start making the streets of Florence a little bit busier. So I've start with slightly larger brush, and I'm gonna go for some white. I'm interested in painting the yellow wall of the building in front of the cathedral. So we'll need some depth and we'll need some darker tone. Now the yellow wall of it is very, very distinctive to Florence architecture. But if I were just to place that yellow, it's going to be just glowing. But that building is in the shadow, so that's not going to work. I'm happy to keep some of the violet, if I can paint accurately, violet for the windows, but my yellow will need to be much, much more stronger in tone. So I'm going to bring a dab of violet to it. So the ochre still remains as a main kind of color. It's not moved to the violet side yet, so you've got that. It's not quite brown, but borderline with some of the darker or lighter version of browns. The rooftop can be slightly even lighter, than my wall. So if the rooftop is competing, it means that I need to make the rooftop lighter, which I don't think should be the case yet. I'm going to continue mixing my yellows here. So maybe still a dab darker. So instead of covering all of that ochre, I just created a new color because I might use that tone maybe close to the pavement. So all I'm checking now is still okay. That's a bit better. I think we're getting there. Tiny bit more, maybe tiny bit of red with it. Okay. Now, if I were to keep some of them violet for the windows, and I'm not going to make it as a main aim, but I'm going to give it a go because I quite like the violet as a color. So then I might have some of the structure. And again, it's a little hard to judge the color till the paint dries, so it's not going to be so reflective. Okay. Perhaps lower parts of the building will have that stronger ochre as it comes lower. I'm just experimenting with the light, so that's why I'm being a little bit more accurate with the details. I might need to go a bit more bold and stronger shortly, so not all the details will be needed. Also, perhaps the other side of the building might be lighter, and maybe I'll exaggerate some of the highlights next to it, and by making it slightly darker, you might not need to have that extra darker tone. At this stage, that's when I can start amending the color, and not every window is going to be the same, or not every light around those structures is going to be the same. It's more of an illusion and playfulness of that reflection of light. I think also the paint is drying slightly darker, so the feel for it will be more important. Okay, that's a good indication. And also let's have a look at perhaps some of them lights and windows on this building. To make them less similar, I need to look for maybe the gaps wider, narrower. Okay. And perhaps some of the windows and shadows of the windows Maybe the shutters will start being in that ochre color first, and then the rose could be changed in color afterwards, just to get initial start. I do like those darker outlines for the rooftops. And not only the rooftops, that's all good. That's a lovely light. A little bit of a glow. Again, a little bit of that story of what is actually happening. The design gently will start creeping in. So far I'm just tweaking, quite like how the campanile dried here. So maybe I'll bring a little bit of heat to it before I start cooling it off. Just a little bit of extra warmth. A dab of white. And we can see some of the light underneath. Almost like a rocket shooting off in the sky, propelling its gorgeous light. Maybe a small amount of that glow. I'll keep on this building. Again, that pattern making and movement of the busy streets will start to happen now. Maybe that light will have a little bit more of a warmth as well. As it bends away. And just looking back, stepping away, evaluating it a little bit more. Some of the reds of them within the streets are a bit quite powerful. Some of the rooftops, maybe some of it could be softened gently. Maybe I need to come back to some of them. Blues of the pavements. I'm very excited to start adding details on the streets, but I think it's a little too early So I'm just comparing and having a quick comparisons. Okay, maybe a tiny bit more glow of the fresh ochre. The base here against the darker corner. Okay, so that's heat creates a powerful light. Right, let's do a tiny bit more amendments to the rooftops. Let's just break them down with a bit more extra light. So if I'll go for some ochre and crimson and quite a lot of white. Let's find some light terracotta. And also maybe this light will start supporting our earlier orange. So it's that orange doesn't have to be everywhere as dark. It also might change its not just tone, but a little bit of the color. Maybe this is more glow in the corner. Maybe just the color of the tiles, maybe a bit of both. So that's a variety of colors coming in. Okay, that glow is there as well. And I can adjust this light here as well. Okay, that's good. And just warming up some of the whites in preparation for some of the cool tones to come in and add their own playfulness. Okay, I think the white here will be more distinctive, warm. It's good that I have placed it gentle first, and I will be making it bolder as the work develops. I want it to appear quite magical and quite extraordinary. Just by adding some playful notes of that singing light highlights. at some point I will need to make a decision of how much details I'll be prepared to bring, or how much details will have to disappear. But for the moment, I'll enjoy them as they're close to me. A little bit of dry brushing, just touching up the perspective and have a feel for the future warm colors. Maybe a bit too bold, but I'm going to give it a try. Golden colors against those pinks and violets. I'm gonna have to persevere and at the same time be patient to see that development of color interactions. I can always track my steps and make some of that volume of warm tones slightly cooler. All right, so the buildings behind the campanile might be slightly lighter. So let's decide on a little highlight. Let's have some more of that magical light, busy in the environment behind. Maybe chimneys, maybe tops of the buildings. Maybe some of these outside areas. As just points of interest and happy dots, happy little busy structures. Rooftop just slightly lighter. Something to offset that similar color. Might be more buildings which turn in towards us and has a lot more light. Okay, so to be a little bit more alive. And I want to keep it going a little at a time. Okay, the pavement started to be a bit more warm and lit up as well. So let's have a look at the colors of the pavement now. As my light outside of my windows is changing, so is my camera just slightly different. And so I decided to tweak it a little. And what I have discovered, some of the functions allow me to play with possible solutions for my color scheme. So you already noticed the difference in color from the previous few moments. But if I were to play with some of them white balance, I can make my Florence painting much more cooler, or I can lighten it up and make it quite warm. So that gives me an opportunity even to think and kind of consider how I can turn the painting into. Now I'm trying to adjust the colors to the actual ones on my painting. So controlling against saturation gives me more heat, or gives me more paler gray tones, and in their own right become quite exciting variations. So as an opportunity to develop your own work, modern technology is fascinating and fantastic to give us those options and ideas. So these are the colors, how they more or less look on my piece. So let's carry on. Let's come back to some of the pavements and let's carry on with getting some more painting done. Let me come back to where I was here. Right, so I'm going to wash my brush and move to a little bit more cooler color for the platzes. So I'm going to go for some white, some ultramarine. Now I know my tone for the pavements is quite light already. Now if I just go for pale ultramarine, so some lighter tone of blue, it might come out first of all very white. Probably will settle a little bit more, but it's just a little bit too glowing white. But if I were to make the blue tiny bit more stronger in saturation, in darkness, and have a dab of ochre to it, it will have a little bit of warmth. But it's not going to make it green. If I would have gone for phthalo blue or Prussian blue with ochre, that will be more likely to end up looking green. But I think I might just be good with that cooler, but at the same time with a hint of warmth in it, color. Can gently tweak the lines here, and even perhaps my shadow, my violet shadow could be slightly extending under a different angle to make a bit more interesting movement here. I might need to wait for it to dry to see the effect of it. Okay, maybe this pavement's going to remain to be of a similar color. Slight change as I'm running out of paint, as I'm mixing a new color of a similar combination. I might not find the exact one, but more importantly, that variety might be even better for us rather than painting in exact same darkness all the way through. It's okay to start as in blocks, but as we develop in the piece, might be better if it's not so strong. Now, I think I'm going to make this plaza wider and the shadow of the cathedral slightly receding. And then when it's all dry, can work into some more busyness of the street, maybe some cafes, some vehicles, some other activity. Okay, let's support this bold light on the opposite side. And again, finalize some of the shadows, maybe their lovely curvature, their slight directions, changes to what I had earlier. Also finalizes some of the structural lines for the cathedral. Okay, that glow of light is quite strong, so I think it's partially because the color is still very wet. So as earlier, I need to persevere and wait. As I'm working my way through. Okay. Right, this paler blue need to be really supported with some extra shadows and also some extra highlights on these architectural elements of the dome. So let's bring some more light here. in its cooler way. And I don't want it overly developing as a line. I wanted to see it still as a shape or even partially uneven texture. Maybe some of the shadows will remain stronger. Some of this light will come up a little bolder. Okay, and even perhaps a little light propelling some of the inner layers. Let's see how that continues. So I start having a very exciting atmosphere by adding more and more details. There's still quite a lot of work to do. I think I have unintentionally widened up some of the spaces between the buildings here. Let's see if some of them will be able to smudge or remove. If not, I can always paint over them with some darker tone. Yeah, just by putting a little bit of stronger shapes, it's widening up my street. Which is not quite medieval Florence, but much bigger city. Right, so I did want to bring some turquoise to my campanile. To make that turquoise, I need a little bit more emerald green. So let's have just a touch of coolness there. I'll use some of the darker ultramarine, just a little bit to offset some of the corners. Maybe catching some of the angles of the windows as well. Those lovely arched Renaissance shapes. And the lower I'll go, the more turquoisey. Same areas will become, so let's make them a tiny bit more lighter and more they're quite decorative, but that feel for the architectural designs. The reflective marble. The heat for the day of the day. Let's see if that's going to be too strong. The moment competes with my pavement, but I think it is a little unfair representation of the color. And I might just take some of it off, but then wait for it to dry. And then reflection, reflection, reflection on the base. I've hardly done anything on the shadow of the tower. Again, it might compete too much, so if I just soften it gently so they're present but not in its overwhelming volume. But some of these perspective lines might be good to use in this paler blue. Little hints of cooler white. Now can come in here, the facade. And I might be stopping for today. There's still quite a lot of exciting work need to be done. But I'm happy to show my process of work here. Maybe a little bit of glimpses of people movement, them a bit too big, and creating that exciting dynamics within the composition, within a very busy city, and how do we go around it. And when I finish my work, I probably will soften some of the shadows. Some of the shadows will remain very solid and dark, but I think I might lighten up part of my sky to make the day a bit more brighter. And perhaps some of the further distance shadows and the greens will start coming up at them far back. Yes, so when I finished, I'll send it through to you to see what the final design, what the final compositions and my decisions on the painting turn it into. So thank you very much for being with me today and following the process, and I hope you had have enjoyed yourself and learned a few tips for your own paintings. Thank you very much, and see you in my next sessions.